Was Rome truly doomed? Did the heart of the empire bleed out slowly, unnoticed as 1,000 tiny cuts? Could a single cunning Vandal, armed with audacity and a brutal pragmatism, unravel centuries of Roman dominance? Let's dive into the chaos, the whispers, and the desperate scramble for survival that marked the twilight of the West. The autumn of 439 wasn't a gentle slide into oblivion. It was a sudden, jarring plunge. Geiseric, the Vandal king, wasn't a leisurely tourist surveying Roman weaknesses. He was a demolition expert, meticulously dismantling the empire's foundations. Carthage, once the jewel of Roman Africa, was now a shattered husk, its legions decimated, its granaries empty, and the garrison, reduced to a skeleton crew, a pathetic handful clinging to the ruins, utterly unprepared for the storm brewing on the horizon. Imagine the scene, a city choked with dust, the air thick with the stench of defeat. Soldiers once proud and battle-hardened, now haunted by the ghosts of fallen comrades. The supply lines, the lifeblood of the empire, were severed. Bread, the staple of the Roman people, vanished from the streets. A collective gasp rippled through the capital as the news spread. The African dole, a lifeline for the masses, was gone. It wasn't a calculated move of military brilliance, it was a deliberate, agonizing starvation tactic. Aetius, the Eastern Roman general, wasn't some mythical hero swooping in to save the day. He was a man grappling with the brutal realities of a crippled empire. The logistics were monstrous. Think about it: transporting an army across the Mediterranean, supplying them, equipping them, all while facing a relentless enemy. It was a logistical nightmare, a logistical impossible nightmare. The Western Empire was bleeding out, its resources stretched thin, its armies depleted. Aetius knew it, everyone knew it. The whispers in the imperial court were laced with fear, with the chilling realization that Rome wasn't just losing battles, it was losing itself. Then came Merobaudes, the imperial panegyrist, a courtier with a peculiar talent, capturing the mood of the moment. He wasn't offering strategic advice, he was delivering a eulogy to the fading grandeur of Rome. Rome's fierce leader was worthy of the staff of retirement, he declared, a subtle, almost mournful observation. He painted a picture of Aetius, not as a warrior, but as a weary statesman nearing the end of his reign. And then a chilling prophecy: Gaudentius, his son, might one day pass on the baton. It wasn't a boast, it was a lament. A recognition that the empire's future was uncertain, that the flame of Rome was flickering dangerously low. Spring 440 brought a flurry of desperate measures, a frantic attempt to stave off the inevitable. Laws were issued like panicked commands, licenses granted to Eastern traders, desperately trying to secure food supplies. Recruits were summoned to the colors, young men thrown into the maw of war with little training, little hope. And then, the chilling threat: anyone harboring a deserter would face the direst of punishments. It was a grim acknowledgement of the situation. The legions were crumbling, the manpower was vanishing, and the empire was resorting to draconian measures to maintain a semblance of order. But Aetius wasn't idle. He understood that a direct assault on Carthage was suicide. He was a shrewd strategist, recognizing that the key to victory lay not on the battlefield, but in the shadows, in diplomacy, in alliances, in exploiting the enemy's weaknesses. He began a slow, deliberate process of gathering forces, pulling together the remnants of the Western army, and crucially, seeking assistance from Constantinople. Imagine the scene: Aetius, a seasoned general, traveling across vast distances, pleading with the Eastern Emperor Theodosius, a man whose empire was far more prosperous and powerful. It wasn't a request for aid, it was a desperate plea for survival. He wasn't asking for a gift, he was begging for a lifeline. The Eastern Empire, flush with wealth and military strength, was the only hope for the West. The logistics were staggering. The sheer scale of the operation was breathtaking, a testament to the Eastern Empire's resources and Aetius's determination. 5 commanders, each bearing the weight of leadership, steering the massive armada towards Sicily. Pentadius, a lucky bureaucrat, was tasked with managing the logistical nightmare, a task that seemed almost impossible. Then, the unthinkable happened. The weather turned, the seas grew turbulent, and the armada, poised to strike at Carthage, was forced to turn back. The troops, the ships, the supplies all returned to their bases, leaving Carthage in the hands of Geiseric. It wasn't a defeat, it was a strategic retreat, a calculated pause, but the story doesn't end there. Merobaudes, the panegyrist, wasn't finished. He penned a series of poems, filled with dark imagery and unsettling prophecies. He depicted Bellona, the goddess of war, lamenting the era of peace, her chariot tilted, her armor stained with blood. She was distressed by the lack of conflict, the absence of the glorious battles that had once defined Rome. Aetius, according to Merobaudes, was needed to restore the madness of war, to unleash the fury of Rome once more. It was a brilliant piece of propaganda, a desperate attempt to rally the troops, to rekindle the spirit of the empire. But the underlying message was clear: a new threat was looming, a threat far greater than the Vandals. Aetius wasn't just fighting a war against Geiseric, he was fighting a war against time, against the inevitable decline of Rome. The Treaty of 442 wasn't a victory, it was a compromise. Geiseric, recognizing his military advantage, offered peace in exchange for recognition and, crucially, a place at the imperial table. He was granted control of Proconsularis and Byzacena, and a portion of Numidia. It was a humiliating concession, a surrender of Roman territory, but it was a pragmatic one. Huneric, Geiseric's eldest son, was sent to Rome as a hostage and betrothed to Eudocia, the Emperor Valentinian's daughter. It was a calculated move, a symbol of the shifting power dynamics in the empire. The flow of grain from North Africa to Rome was secured, a lifeline for the capital, but at a price. The empire was forced to acknowledge Geiseric as a client king and friend, a formal recognition of his authority. The image of Roman royalty marrying barbarian royalty was a jarring one, a symbol of the empire's weakness, but also a testament to its desperate attempts to maintain control. But the peace was a fragile facade. The confiscations in Proconsularis were brutal. Senatorial estates, once symbols of Roman power, were seized by the Vandals and redistributed to their followers. The allotments of the Vandals, essentially, land grants, became the foundation of a new Vandal elite. Imagine the scene: Roman senators stripped of their wealth and exiled from their ancestral lands, wandering the streets of Carthage, their lives shattered, their fortunes lost. And the rest of North Africa. The wealthy landowners, the very backbone of the provincial economy, were driven out, forced to seek refuge in the east. Thousands fled to Italy, seeking the protection of the imperial court. The state, in a desperate attempt to maintain stability, implemented measures to protect these exiles, granting them tax breaks and prioritizing them in the leasing of public lands. The financial consequences of the loss of North Africa were catastrophic. The empire's revenue plummeted, its coffers drained. Tax laws were revised, exemptions were withdrawn, and the state resorted to increasingly desperate measures to raise funds. The once mighty Roman treasury was bleeding out, slowly but surely. The Treaty of 442 wasn't a victory, it was a postponement. It bought the empire some time, but it didn't solve the underlying problems. The Western Empire was trapped in a vicious cycle of decline, its resources depleted, its armies weakened, and its authority undermined. The fragments of Merobaudes' panegyric offer a chilling glimpse into the future. He describes Geiseric as the occupier of Libya, a conqueror who had torn down by exceedingly fated arms the seat of Dido's kingdom. He paints a picture of a Vandal elite enjoying the spoils of war, marrying into Roman royalty, and consolidating their power. But the panegyric also reveals a deep sense of unease, a recognition that the empire was teetering on the brink. The image of a mosaic depicting the emperor and his wife as bright stars of the heavens is juxtaposed with the image of an exile weeping for his lost power. It's a stark reminder of the contrast between the imperial facade and the grim reality of the situation. The story of the Vandals and the West Roman Empire isn't a tale of heroic battles and glorious victories. It's a story of slow decline, of missed opportunities, and of a civilization struggling to adapt to a changing world. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency, the importance of strong leadership, and the fragility of empires. Was Rome truly doomed? Perhaps not entirely. But the seeds of its destruction were sown long before Geiseric crossed the sea. The empire had grown too vast, too complex, too reliant on a system of taxation and administration that was increasingly unsustainable. The constant wars, the political corruption, the economic stagnation, all contributed to the empire's decline. And Geiseric, the cunning Vandal king, was simply the catalyst that brought it all crashing down. He didn't single-handedly destroy Rome, he exploited its weaknesses, capitalized on its vulnerabilities, and ultimately delivered the final blow. But the story doesn't end there. The Treaty of 442 was just the beginning. The Vandals continued to expand their territory, raiding Italy, disrupting trade, and undermining Roman authority. The West Roman Empire, weakened and fractured, struggled to maintain control. The fate of the empire hung in the balance, a precarious dance between survival and collapse. And the echoes of Geiseric's victory, the memory of Carthage's fall, would resonate for centuries to come, a haunting reminder of the twilight of the West. And so, as the sun sets on the ruins of Carthage, casting long shadows across the Mediterranean, we are left with a profound question. Could a more decisive response have changed the course of history? Could a stronger, more unified Roman Empire have prevented the collapse? Or was the decline of the West simply an inevitable consequence of the forces that had been shaping it for centuries?